Good afternoon. I'm Dion Clark. I'm the NC Works Career Pathways Director for the state of North Carolina. And with me today is Kip Blakely. Kip Blakely is the Vice President of Sales and Marketing, I beg your pardon, the Vice President of Customer and Government Relations at HAECO Americas. Started in 2007 as the Vice President of Marketing and then transitioned to his current role. Kip represents HAECO as Chairman of the Guilford Technical Community College Foundation Board, the High Point University Board of Visitors, Guilford County's Workforce Development Board, Chair of the NC Works Commission and Board of Piedmont Family Services, and Commissioner on the War Memorial Coliseum Board, all of those here in Greensboro where HAECO is located. So Kip, you know, that was just the kind of scratching the surface of your bio, certainly more extensive than that, a lot of work in the private sector and even some in the political arena, but I wanted to highlight the work that you've done at HAECO because it seems as though in your role, you're well vested with the company and in the community. And if you don't mind, can you talk a little bit about why it's important for you and for your employer to have that community presence and community involvement?
Well, certainly, and thank you very much for having me here today. And if I could just real quickly tell you a little bit about HAECO. You may know it as Temco Aviation. Our corporate headquarters are here in Greensboro. We've been in the aviation business for over 25 years. We have roughly 1,800 employees in North Carolina and 3,200 employees throughout the United States. But we do heavy scheduled maintenance on commercial and military aircraft here. And we also manufacture interior parts, so seats, lavs, galleys, anything on the inside of an aircraft is what we manufacture here. So as you ask, is it important to us as a company to be involved in the community? And I have to admit that back in '07 when I came, we kind of had a new management team come in, and we discovered that we really didn't have a presence or a good relationship with the community, and our management team felt that was important. And so we set out to change that and become more involved in our community. And as we were doing that, we also discovered we had another big problem. Now you have to remember, none of our customers are here. All of our customers are from around the world. They fly their assets, they fly their planes in here, we repair them, we fix the interior, and they fly away. So there wasn't necessarily any real reason to be connected to the community, but we thought it was important as being a major employer here. So we started getting involved, and as that was happening, we're coming out of the Great Recession, and we really are struggling to hire employees. And so I kind of started migrating towards workforce development issues and the community college and looking for, okay, where are we going to get our workforce? Because we were really struggling. Historically, have gotten our workforce from 3 different places. One is from what we'd call homegrown. They're coming from the community college. You have to go to 2 years of community college to get a certificate before you can touch a commercial aircraft. 2's from airlines. Well, airlines are now contracting all their maintenance, so there's no one coming out of the airlines. And the 3rd place we get our employees were from, or still is, from the military. But of course, at that time, we were 10 years into war. No one was retiring. So the military vein had dried up, the airline vein had dried up, and it was down to our community colleges. And quite frankly, we weren't pleased with what we were getting. And so that's kind of what started our journey down this path of what now we know as career pathways.
Right. Career pathways, right. So, Kip, so I think I hear you saying 2 things. One, that not necessarily because you had business relationships in the community, but you saw yourself as a major employer, representing a major employer, and valued the community relations for that reason. And 2, because it made good business sense to get better immersed in the community college and the places where you would find and tap the talent who would do the great work that you do at HAECO. Would you say that?
That's exactly right, and that's what we were looking for.
Okay, so when you think about the number of boards that you're on, and I listed the number of community organizations, it would seem that the various roles and the community foundations really help you to have a unique perspective on the potential of the workforce here, given the proper education and training. Could you talk about that?
You bet. So we have an aviation council here, so there's a cluster of aviation companies in Guilford County and in the Triad. And in our meetings, we had monthly meetings, we all were struggling with this issue of workforce because aviation came out of the recession really, really hot. And we were really needing employees, and we just were not finding them. So collectively, as an aviation council, we went to the community college and got involved. But we quickly discovered that the reason we weren't happy with what product we were getting from the community college, our fault because we had not been engaged and involved. But we also were finding that the students that they were getting in, they weren't ready to learn what they needed to learn and know. So we then started looking at the high schools, and we started looking at their curriculum and what could we do to identify students that would be good to go into this aviation program. And we quickly discovered there that it was too late there also, that we had to go to the middle schools. So what we've done here, we've created some aviation high schools that are four-year programs. The student starts in the 9th grade. They go all the way through the 12th grade in this aviation school. They have incredible work opportunities, life learning opportunities throughout those 4 years at the different companies. And then they also are co-enrolled their 12th grade year at the community college. And we are finding that this is the secret sauce for our industry here. And we're starting to even expand that into a number of other industries. Our hope is that we can take the 7 clusters that we have here in the Triad and have a number of high schools around those 7 clusters that are doing the same type experience, that they're taking the 4 years of high school, they're having job shadowing opportunities, internship opportunities, and they finish up at the community college and they immediately get hired. And that's kind of where we are right now, and we couldn't be more excited about it. It is working.
Excellent, excellent. What you said raises so many additional questions, but let me just throw this extra one out at you and see if you can talk some about this. How do you, starting at as early as middle school, you know, we don't think about choosing our career. I certainly wasn't thinking about choosing my career in the 7th grade, but when you're thinking about starting out at middle school, is there a relationship or is there a role for HACO in engaging parents? How do students come to the idea that, okay, in 9th grade, I'm going to take this 4-year trajectory, and how do you convince parents that their kids really can be successful without going immediately to the 4-year colleges?
It hasn't been easy. I'll tell you, and it hasn't been a short journey. It takes an incredible long time. You just think about it, obviously. I mean, you're starting a student in the 9th grade. First of all, you've got to find them, identify them. Do they have the skills, talent, desire to get into that type and ability to get into that type of program? And of course, here in North Carolina, students are assessed, and they're either on a college-ready, career-ready, or a mixture of the two. So we're really looking for that career-ready student. Then we work with the local workforce development here to use job keys to help identify and assess the skills. And then start talking to them about, would you like to get into this career and into this field? And Dr. Cindy Waters runs the Andrews Aviation program here. Andrews is a public high school in High Point here. And she had to just, for the first 4 or 5 years, work her tail off to find the right person, the right student. She wouldn't just let anybody in, but she had 50 seats, 2 classes. And she tried to get the best 50 that she could find that had the apparent skills and desire to do this type of work. I'll tell you now that since we've had incredible success and we're hiring all of these students once they finish at GTCC, she increased the enrollment in the 9th grade class this year from 50 to 100.
Wow.
And she still has a waiting list to get in.
Wow, wow.
So we're not having, and she's not having to work near as hard to go out and recruit. The word of mouth that parents and students are seeing, hey, they really are getting a career.
Right,
and
right.
They really are
good,
getting
a career with a good wage, right, and good wage and in high demand.
You know, we're, these students, they're 19, they had, as a rule, they have absolutely zero educational debt because the community college is paid for. Their high school obviously is paid for. They come to work for us, they're making over $30,000 a year. They've got health insurance, they've got a 401k that's matched. It's in many cases, they're lifting their households out of poverty, which is
At 19.
exciting. Yep.
At
And
19.
they most of the time become the breadwinner. Many of them, they're, maybe the only one working in that home. So it's a great opportunity. But the thing about it is, though, it's not just that they got great training and they've got a certificate. I think it's because many of the aviation companies here really get involved with the students by opening up the doors, like I said, in the 10th grade with tours, 11th job shadow, 12th intern. You get to know these kids, and I got to quit calling them kids.
I think it's all right.
They're my
It's all right.
coworkers, my coworkers. Yeah, but you really get to be in their ear a little bit about making smart choices. They know they're going to have to pass a drug test and the alcohol abatement program, and that they're going to have to make good choices. They know they're going to have to show up with their badge on and show up on time and know where to go in the facility. And all of those things are so important. We constantly always talk about, the soft skills. Well, they don't have this skill. They don't have. Teach them.
Teach them.
Let them
Excellent.
in. Teach
Excellent.
them.
And you know what, at KIPP, it makes a big difference because those of us who do education, there are a number of people in here that represent, K-12 and community colleges. We can tell them, but it makes a difference when the engaged employer is saying, this is what it's going to take to get in the door. Something as simple as being on time and having that badge. So that partnership is awesome, and I really commend you and HACO for it. Let me ask you this. Now, you've been on the NC Works Commission a long time, now serving as chair, and so you're well familiar with the 8 best practice criteria that we've established to certify career pathways. Now, when I'm out, and I spend a lot of time out in the state working with the local teams and talking about those 8 best practice criteria and why people should get their career pathways certified, a lot of the times the question I get is, why is the certification so important? Why, and what makes NC Works certification unique from the myriad of career pathways, strategies that a lot of people in the local areas have heard before. So even with the thinking about HACO and thinking about your own experience as a commission member, would you talk about why you think career pathway certification is so important?
Well, I'd be happy to, because I tell you, there are a lot of learnings out there along the way that we learned. Some were easy learnings and some were difficult learnings.
Right.
So, I think that certification process really can help communities take quicker steps and know the best way to get there. One of the keys I think that we've learned in this area around this is that it's important to have just not a business that you try to create a relationship with. Try to create a relationship with a cluster. Whether it's the aviation industry or the logistics or transportation or advanced manufacturing. There's real strength in numbers. And not only is it just the strength in numbers, but there's knowledge to be learned from all the different ones. So we're in the maintenance, repair, and overhaul business, but right next door to us is HondaJet. And so they're an OEM, an original equipment manufacturer. So though the person that has to walk in our door to work on an aircraft has to have the same certification to walk into Honda, we need 2 really different skills. We need the same certificate, but we need a different skill set. So I think it's important to, if you could try to cluster some businesses in your area as you start to try to do this, you'll get a lot more knowledge and you'll have a much more rounded and successful program. And it's those kinds of key learnings. I'll tell you another one that we've discovered along the way is, like with the job shadowing, we don't have people at HACO that are in charge of the job shadowing. Matter of fact, when I started talking about that, they're like, who's going to do that?
Right.
And so the key learning there is that Junior Achievement runs the job shadowing program for Guilford County. So HACO and Honda and Ralph Lauren and UPS and Lincoln Financial, those are all part of our clusters here: logistics, advanced manufacturing, banking. And so Junior Achievement is the kind of the glue in between the company and the school. And so they make sure that the school has the right students selected and that they know what they're getting into and that they pick them up and put them on the white activity bus and get them to the company and make sure there's a handoff there with the company. And then they stay there with the students all day long at our facilities. Plus, they have a really great program at lunch. Junior Achievement brings lunch in. And we generally will have somebody from our team go and speak. And then Junior Achievement will do one of their lunch and learns, maybe anywhere from business ethics to finance to how to have a business meal, all of those great soft skills that you might not pick up in another area. So it's so important to have those partners to actually help administer, because businesses don't have people sitting around to do that.
Right.
For the 12th grade internships, we actually work that through the workforce development boards. So we're a dangerous work environment, and
talk about that, Kip. Talk about some of the precautions that you take with high schoolers still, with a lot of times under 18. So
yeah,
talk
we
about
we
that.
do a lot of advanced training before they get there, but we were having a heck of a time getting them there because our legal counsel was like, "You want to do what?"
Right.
And so we were actually able to come up with a workaround on that, to where the interns are actually employees of Guilford County Workforce Development Board. They're on their payroll, they're on their insurance, they just happen to be let into our facilities. So that's another one of those key learnings, but a great way that you can work around to get to where you can still get those students into a facility.
And again, it goes back to those relationships, developing that initial relationship with the workforce boards, the high schools, to make those things happen.
Yeah, and I'll even add to this. We've been very fortunate and successful at raising funds to go into junior achievement and to go into the Workforce Development Board to pay those students. So local grants, foundations, they hear about the program, they see the success of the program, and we've been very fortunate to raise money to actually fill the coffers to where those organizations have the money to run them.
Excellent, excellent. At this time, let me just make an announcement to our audience. If you have questions, what I want you to do is write those questions down. And Lauren Coffey, Lauren, would you stand briefly? Lauren will collect any questions that you might have. If this interview is raising questions for you that you want to ask of Kip, he's happy to take questions from the audience. So write those down, and send those forward, and we'll answer some audience questions as we go along. But Kip, going back to our conversation, we often hear, be it directly or indirectly, that educational institutions develop plans to train the workforce without consulting with the employers who will benefit or not from the training. We often hear that we develop the plan and then we present it to the workforce. Can you tell us how we could best engage with the employers before we develop the plans and before we think about those training opportunities?
Yeah, I think the key there is I may have mentioned earlier that to find those clusters and those businesses that have multiple companies and where you can cluster them together, and particularly those that are in need. I have to tell you, before we started this journey, we didn't know what we needed. I mean, we knew we needed a worker, and we knew that we needed somebody that could be productive, but we really didn't know. We just kind of accepted what came at us. And
Right.
until we were forced into a situation of really dire straits, did we have to dig down and learn what we needed and learn how to work with
Right.
the community colleges and the high schools, because as you can imagine, we don't speak the same language.
Right, absolutely.
But with some great mentors that I've had here, whether that be you or Catherine Moga Bryan or Lillian Plummer or so many, Dr. Parker, Dr. Scott Rawls.
Right.
I think, they never said this to my face, but they could have said many times, well, for the fourth time, Kip.
Let me explain it again.
But we finally figured each other out and figured out how to work. But it's not easy. I'll tell you, it's not easy. Like I said, companies don't have people sitting around
Right.
just waiting to do that. But again, with those clusters, you can grab enough people and enough knowledge to where all of a sudden you've got a great program built.
Right. You remind me of, just to share this with you, I have never worked in the private sector, and I've always worked in the public sector or academia, and my husband is an IT contractor at Fort Bragg, and so when I try to tell him about all these intrinsic values and equity and fairness and altruism, and he looks at me like I'm from a different planet, so I
And
get...
he's going, what's your forecast and what's your budget? And
Right, exactly. And I'm like, well, what we value is doing it for the students and, the future of the next generation, and he's just looking at me like. It's about the work. And so you're right, we don't speak the same language, but we have a common need, right? And we do want to see young people be successful. And I know that HACO wants that, but at the same time, I recognize that HACO wants to be successful too. But we don't think those things, we don't think they're mutually exclusive. We think we can do both. And so that makes good sense. Now let me offer the flip side. So I offered the side where, education and training programs develop the programs without talking to engaged employers. But the flip side of that is that high schools and community colleges will then say, employers don't know what they want. And you alluded to that employers either don't know what they want or they don't know how to tell us what they want. So the question is, how can we, on the education side, the workforce development side, how can we help you? What language can we speak to help make it easier for employers to say, we need these skills, we need this skill set, we need these competencies? How can we help?
Well, we need to build long-term relationships together, because normally when a company comes to the community college and their hair's on fire and they need bodies, they need bodies.
Right.
And as I said, this is a 4 or 5 year process. So you've got to have a relationship, you've got to have a long-term commitment, and both parties have to be working together and to stay the course, knowing that in the end that the employer will still be there and will still need employees, because that's another thing you also hear,
right,
that I've heard from educational folks, is like, well, we gear up and we train all these folks, and then the company moves to Mexico, or
right,
they're
right,
on a downturn, and so they don't need them. And again, that's why it's important to be in a cluster.
right.
So that if one particular side of the industry is down, like if our maintenance side is going in a downturn, well, hopefully Honda as an OEM is in an upturn.
Right.
So you can have a place for all these students that you are producing.
Right. And let me put in a shameless plug there for career pathway certification, because one of those 8 best practice criteria is developing a pathway that's sustainable over time, that won't fade away when the first employer goes out of business or goes to Mexico, as you said. One of the things about certification is that it challenges the local teams to develop those career pathways in such a way that they're not as elastic, they're not as susceptible to the ebbs and flows of one employer, but really following an industry over a long period of time. So we think that's important.
Well, and I think this will turn into the greatest economic development tool that our economic development folks will have.
Yeah.
I mean, when they can bring in another company that's looking to expand, grow, or come here, and they can say, okay, well, there's your land,
right,
and there's your facilities, and there's your workforce.
There's your workforce.
That's going to be the secret sauce
right,
for North Carolina and regionally as people start to recruit.
yeah.
It's going to be about that workforce.
Kip, I'm proud of you. I'm so proud of you for saying that, because sometimes the workforce development can be the stepchild of economic development, right? We're looking for those big incentives and, the tax breaks and things, but we can't do this without the workforce. We
Nope.
can't do this without the people of all stripes, right? The entry level, the mid-career, and the senior level, to bring those KSAs, those talents, those skills and abilities to the work. So I really appreciate you saying what an instrumental role workforce development plays in economic development. You talked about this a bit, but I want to ask you to talk about it a little bit further, because one of the things we want to do as much as possible is mitigate some of the liabilities that employers may have. I mean, when I think about what you do, I mean, airplane maintenance and repair and things of that nature, it seems very specialized. It seems like it could be dangerous, as you indicated. But we're talking about grabbing young people as early as 8th, 9th grade and getting them into that career endeavor. How can employers reasonably offer job shadowing, internships, apprenticeships, on-the-job training, and really protect themselves? How can employers protect themselves at the same time that they make good opportunities for young workers?
Well, safety is the first thing that we start every day with all of our employees. So it is truly the foundation. Safety and quality is what we start every day with, and then that's the same thing we do with these students. As they start to come to our facilities, we really grind in on the safety and quality aspect of it. And knock on wood, we've got a great safety record and accident rate, but we work on it every day. The other thing we do for our job shadowers, it's really the first time that they've been in our facilities for an extended period of time. The night before they start, we have a dinner and we have the job shadower and their parents or parent or guardian come, tell them about where we are, what we do. We tour the facility so that it's eyes wide open. Everybody knows exactly what they're getting into. And it's also very telling. I'll tell a couple of funny things. We're going through the second or third hangar. This was our first class, and one of the students was like, "What is that smell?" I'm like, "That's jet fuel." That may be a problem if that's bothering you. But the other really, really neat thing that it happens with every class, and I don't know, we're up to 12 probably now. But they come in, and I try to be there for all of them, and they're at the front door, and I'm like, "Hi, Kip Blakely, welcome to HACO." You know, and the parents, "Nice to meet you." And invariably the student, remember they're juniors now. It's not, and I'll kind of look away, and the parent will go, and I'll turn back, and they'll kind of look up to where you can almost see their eyes, and by the fifth week, I'll see them out in the facility somewhere, and they'll be like, "Hey, Mr. Blakely, can't wait to come back and be an intern. Can I start earlier?" You just see them start to come out of their shells, and then by the time they are there interning, you go out in the facilities, and we work in teams on each aircraft, and you start with a team meeting, and after every break there's a team meeting, and after lunch a team meeting, and man, they're right in there in the middle of it, and you can't really tell who the 18-year-old is and who, well, you can tell the older worker, obviously, which is another real problem that the aviation industry is having. After Vietnam, when we're rolling that down, aviation was really hot then as well. And so we have an incredible aging workforce in aviation. That's not a HACO problem. It's a global aviation problem. And so we've got 30% of our workers going to retire in the next 4 years.
Wow.
So we're taking these 17, 18, 19, 20-year-olds, and we're slamming them up against these 60, 65-year-olds trying to
learn everything.
Just
learn
absorb.
everything.
And it's so much fun to see. Another big problem we have too many males. We need women and females in aviation really bad as well. But these cranky old men, who are there just, "I've got 2 more years," and you get them working with these young kids just push them. So we've seen some great relationships develop between young and old, and for a lot of them, it becomes a father figure as well.
Right. Very good, very good. Now, you mentioned about needing more women. How can we help? How can those of us who do CTE at the high schools and the community colleges, is there a way that we can help to send women into those not necessarily traditional women's jobs? Yeah,
that's a great byproduct that we're finding from the high schools that we're starting, is that we have a much higher ratio of minorities and females that are going into the programs, and that's a super byproduct we didn't expect, and so that's something that we really encourage all of our schools and the people that are in charge of the aviation or STEM or advanced manufacturing programs to really seek out. That we really need to get minorities and females into the programs, and quite honestly, black males. Goodness gracious, what's the unemployment rate of a
double digits for still African American men at that age.
So we're the majority of our hires that are coming through are black African Americans, and it's working out great.
Working out great, good. Now, you talked about the attrition, the aging workforce. So that must mean not only are you hiring a lot of individuals, the young workforce, but they must then have career opportunities to move on up in the organization. Can you talk about that?
I can, and I kind of hate to talk about it in public a lot. First of all, my HR department's always like, "Don't say that. Anybody who makes 1 penny less come in here and want a raise."
Right.
But we do have them on a career pathway that by the time they're 25, they'll be making over $50,000 a year.
Wow.
And the other reason they don't like for me to talk about that, especially at the schools, they lose all of the instructors. They're like, "Hey, whoa,
I'll come and work there."
But it's an incredible opportunity for them and their families. And it's great for us. What we find with hiring the homegrown is that they're sticky. They tend to stay with us. And you think about those other two groups in which we normally hire from, airlines and the military. You know, they spent their entire career
Traveling,
getting
on the go.
orders. You know, nope, you're headed off to Fort Benning. Nope, you're headed off to, and so sure enough, about every 3 to 5 years, a pretty good percentage of those folks say, I decide I want to go live in Mobile, Alabama for a couple of years. And so they're literally a migrant workforce. But those that we train early and get them in early, they tend to stay here. But as I tell those students, you get into an aviation career, and there is not a state or a country in the world that you can't go to and get a job.
Right, very
because
marketable.
it's very marketable. And they stay here long enough to learn that trade and skill. They can go anywhere they want to go, but we certainly hope they'll stay right here with us.
Excellent, excellent. Let me just make another pitch for the audience. If you have any questions, feel free to write those down. Lauren will collect any questions if you have those, and then she'll bring them to the front. We'll answer those at about 2:15. So if you have any questions, please, by all means, share those. Yeah, if you'll just write those down, Lauren will come around and collect those. So, and we'll answer those questions at about 2:15. We'll take a few questions. Thank you so much, Kip. Let me say this to you now, because like I say, I walk this line between the workforce development side, the education side, and I think for those who do the training, the educators, it's often perceived as though, you know, the big corporations, the HAECOs of the world, come in and do us a favor by letting our students do job shadowing and interning. But today you've presented it differently. That really it's a boon, it's a win-win for both parties, not necessarily the corporations doing the students a favor or the education institutions a favor. How can we convince employers that it's in their best interest to develop these career pathways, to be a part of this process, and for them to help us to develop that trained workforce? How can we convince them?
Well, I think if you can find those partners that make it easier for them, whether it's a junior achievement or a workforce development board, but to make it where it's easy, because I'll tell you, it's not easy to get started internally. Back 7 or 8 years ago, whenever it was we were starting this, and I was going around the facilities and I was looking for people, you know, like, hey, would you mind if I give you this high school person here? They're going to be here just for 5 weeks and job chat, you know, and I'd get this. Really?
Right.
You want me to babysit too?
Right.
You know, you get that attitude, right, that you're asking them to do something else. But after the first couple of semesters that we went through that, now I'll go around the facility literally now, and we have a list. People are coming up and say, hey, I want to get one of those interns. I want to get one of those job shadowers. But they're having fun with it.
Right.
And they're seeing that they're helping make a difference in these kids' lives.
Making a difference. And I value that greatly, what you say. You say you serve a lot of minorities, a lot of blacks. And is it the case that you serve a lot of black men in these roles, young black guys? Or?
It is. That the enrollment is 60%, I believe.
So and not to get too, you know, not to move over too far out of that private sector mindset, but you can make a profit, be successful, and still do a lot of good. And it seems like HAECO's figured out the secret.
Well, I don't know if we figured it out, but we're having fun at it, and it seems to be working.
Excellent, excellent. Well, let me say this. Sometimes we hear that there's a group of committed employers like HAECO, like HondaJet, some of those, who rally behind these workforce initiatives, who do some of the, you know, come to the table, serve at every committee, go to all the meetings, help us develop career pathways. And then once you've done all the work, invested in those work-based learning opportunities, other corporations come in and take the talent, pilfer that talent, who have not been invested in the process of developing the pipeline. Is that the reality? And how can we help to mitigate some of that for those employers who really do support us 100%?
Well, it is a reality, but what we're finding actually is that students that were going to GTCC, this is before these programs, and they get their certificate, their A&P, only 2/3 of them would come into aviation, not just into one of our specific companies, but a third of them would go somewhere else. Because if you think about it, what it takes to get your A&P, and now this seems incredibly simple, right? But you've got to be able to read,
Right.
work directions, work with your hands to do what you read, repair it, replace it, and then record what you've done. That is an incredible talent in today's workforce. And that's what we're looking for. And so we compete with oil and gas industry, amusement parks, locomotives, you name it, where they need maintenance and people that can read and work with their hands. It is a very valuable talent. And so that's how, as an aviation council, we were able to really kind of coalesce around this workforce issue, because we realized that though the only thing that we're competing for is workforce, the only way we're going to get it is by working together.
Right.
And so that's really the key. And yeah, you're going to have some drop off. And yeah, we've had some folks that go to Honda, or they go to Tulsa and go to work for American Airlines.
Mm-hmm.
But that's okay, because I'll tell you, I just got back from a cargo, it's called Cargo Facts meeting, an international meeting in Miami late last night, and there were a number of us there talking about it, and we try to get on panels at every one of these conventions and conferences that, as an industry, we have got to start these types of programs, because as an industry, we're not going to survive.
Mm-hmm.
And we are a global industry in aviation, and we need young people coming in. So we're trying to start this all. As a matter of fact, just 2 weeks ago, I was in Lake City, Florida, where we have a facility, and we cut the ribbon on a new aviation high school there. So
Excellent.
we're trying to start these aviation programs. We've seen it work so well here. We're trying to start them in all of the cities that we have locations.
Excellent. So we've talked a little bit about the difference between that public sector and private sector, and you've been around us enough to know that we love a meeting. We love a good meeting. The only thing we love more than meetings would be committees. So now, but how do we best maximize the engaged employer's time? I mean, we can't ask you to come to meeting after meeting. I mean, that's what we do. But I know that in the private sector, not so much. You know, you have a different, your work week and your work day looks a lot different. So how do we maximize the time of the employers willing to come to the table, willing to be a part of these local teams that develop career pathways without giving you that meeting fatigue or committee fatigue? How do we best, in the education and training side, ask you to engage with us?
Well, you need some patience, because most companies have a rhythm to them that, you know, there are just those periods of time where they've got to go, and they're not available. But if you can understand those rhythms and really kind of lean on them a little bit more when you know they have some slack periods. But also, like I said, really reach out and don't try to do it just on one company. You know, try to get, if there's already an association formed, really try to enter there.
Okay.
And to where you've got a number of different companies that you can pull from. And of course, technology is great. You know, we're all sitting around now with things so
Right.
we can whip back and forth, and that makes a big difference,
Right.
to where we don't have to be there in person. But we can communicate quickly.
Excellent, excellent. Now, we talked about all of these different work-based learning opportunities, but we know that for young people, they're not all created equal. Would you talk about, at least from the employer perspective, which of those work-based learning opportunities seem to yield the best results for student learning, and then for having that student, that young person, ready to jump into the workforce?
Well, Dan, it really, that really kind of depends on your business. You know, I've talked more today about job shadowing and internships, and that works well for us simply because the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, has a set learnings that you have to go through to get certificated. Now, for our advanced manufacturing and our manufacturing piece, that is much more suited for a, I've gone blank, the apprenticeship.
The apprenticeship.
And a pre-apprenticeship. And we hope to start some pre-apprenticeship programs for machining, because that's not regulated by the FAA, and so it works much better when you have that format to follow for apprenticeships. And so we see for machining companies that apprenticeships are probably the way to go.
Okay.
And for the aviation side, it may be more on the intern and job shadowing.
So it's specific to the employer, and even more so, specific to the nature of the work. But I guess in that case, it's incumbent upon us on the education and training side to ask those questions and make sure we're looking for those opportunities that well fit with what the market demands,
Right.
with what the employer demands.
Yeah, again, and just building that long-term relationship so that you know exactly what it is that both sides would benefit from, because
Right.
either one are beneficial. It really doesn't matter to the student if
Yeah.
they're just getting in there and learning that skill or that job trade.
So Kip, that was the last of the questions that I had for today, but we'll take questions certainly from the audience. But I think it's important to say this. It could have gone very differently in 2007. You could have said, hey, there's no talent here, there's no workforce here, let's pack it up and head to somewhere where there is the talent. Or you could have done what you did, take the time to see the potential. It wasn't going to happen in a month or a semester, even a year, but to develop that potential workforce over time. I think we're grateful as a state and really appreciate what you as an individual and what HAECO as a company, as a corporation has done for workforce in the state of North Carolina. You talked about 12 classes, I think. How frequently do you take a new class?
Every semester we have a group come through. I think last year we had 54 students that were either job shadowers, interns, or co-ops. We didn't talk about co-ops either, but that's getting students that are on an engineering path to where they come in, and it's like a paid internship as well. So we had 54 this past year, and I think we're shooting to get 65 in this year. But it's kind of where these programs are kind of on a school calendar.
Right,
It's by
right.
semester, and then we have the summer
Right.
folks come in, and then we have the next semester
Right.
come in.
It's funny how when you leave school yourself, you don't think in terms of semesters anymore, but I guess in these programs, they've got you back on that semester calendar.
They
huh?
do, and again, that's one of those things that you have to partner on
Right,
to figure out
absolutely.
the correct rhythm.
Absolutely. At this time, we'll open it up to audience questions. Again, if you have any questions, by all means, write those down. Lauren will collect those, and we'll put Kip on the spot a little bit. We'll put Kip on the spot to see if he's ready. Let's see what we have. Okay, so the first question, does HAECO offer any type of signing bonus for highly qualified applicants? How does the compensation work right in the door?
Yeah, actually, right now we're really needing employees, and we just put out. I just saw this in it's called The Leading Edge, is our newsletter that comes out every week, and we started a program this week that will pay our existing employees $500 if they can find somebody who's qualified and they pass the drug test, and we hire them, and they stay on for 60 days. Our existing employees
All right.
get a signing bonus, and that's actually been a really good way for us to find employees.
Sure. Incentivizing those who know.
Incentivize those, and of course they know, I worked with this guy over here. I know what he's doing now. So
Yeah.
so they're good recruiters for us. And you can imagine if a friend calls up and says, hey, I'm working here at HAECO, and it's pretty cool place to work, and they're hiring, and I'm sure they don't tell them they get $500 if they come, but nonetheless. So, but certainly for when you start getting into the engineering level, there's certainly some bonuses and opportunities there for help moves and that sort of thing.
Excellent. Oh, good question. What has been your experience working with individuals that might have disabilities, clients from vocational rehab or services from the blind? Do you have any role for people that might have disabilities that could still do work at HAECO?
We sure do. We started a program 3 or 4 years ago for severely disabled veterans. Over 50% of our workforce are veterans. And so we were looking for opportunities to take generally multiple amputees and come up with some jobs to where they could work, and it was a great experience for us because we thought that we had a safe work environment, and that that it was accessible for all, but boy, when you start getting folks that are amputees or wheelchairs and what have you around your facilities all day long, you start going, oh, we got to fix that.
Right.
We got to fix that. So we had changed a number of things. Sadly, though, on that program, it's not going as well as we had hoped, and the unfortunate reason is because they start making too much money, and they lose their disability and their benefits, And their concern is, as you can imagine, with these multiple injuries, they have many periods for the rest of their lives where things go wrong with their bodies and they're unable to work. And if they've cut off those benefits, apparently it is an act of Congress to get them shut back,
to get them back.
turned back on. And so that really has hindered that program. And so we're trying to figure out a way to work around that, because again, it's kind of like watching those young people come in and learn and work with adults. You see the disabled come in and work in society, and how much their spirits are lifted.
Yeah. So Kip, you did something pretty salient there. We think about where policy meets practice, right? Where policy meets practice. So we may have policies that impact what could be good practice, and so some things that we have to think about at different levels, at the at both legislative and executive levels, things that maybe we could fix to accommodate people who even with severe disabilities would work if given the opportunity. So to that end, how can someone with a disability or someone who represents someone with a disability reach out to HACO? Is it kind of the same process? What is that process?
It is. You need some training from probably a community college to come into work in our workforce. Again, 'cause we're so regulated by the Federal Aviation Administration on who can touch and work on aircraft. So that's the process, really. It's certainly open.
Yeah. Well, that's a good segue into the next question, Kip. How likely are you to work with students with criminal backgrounds? And I guess if you don't mind, I'll modify that from students to just individuals at all ages. How does that work?
It's difficult, again, because of the FAA regulations. I would not say that we have a check the box. It depends on what it is. But there are certain backgrounds that can get around that and work around that, but it's difficult.
That's a challenge, yeah. Right? And so I suppose that's one of also the benefits to starting them so young, probably before they get into any type of trouble, and maybe some encouragement to stay on that right track.
I truly believe that we've probably have kept some kids from out of trouble, that in the back of their mind they've gone, yeah. I've got to go in tomorrow, or I know I'm going to have to take a drug test, yeah.
Yeah, very true, very true. We have a saying. I live in the Cumberland County district area, and so we have this local saying that jobs stop bullets. Jobs stop bullets, and so there's no doubt, no doubt that just the opportunity for employment for people from all stripes, from different walks of life, certainly does help and keep those, like you say, those criminal backgrounds clear. No doubt that it helps. Let me read this one, Kip. What instruments or self-assessment tools are used to identify students to participate? Very good. So getting those students into the programs. You talked about the one woman at Andrews, I think you indicated Andrews High School. What's that initial assessment like? Who identifies as a good candidate? Yeah,
so for Andrews, Dr. Waters has personally done that, and that's really a key. You got to have, whoever's running that high school program has got to have such passion for it, and she does. She's a pilot, she's a technician. I think she's got every type of certificate you could possibly have from the FAA, and so she's passionate about aviation, and she knows what a difference it's made in her life. And this school is so important to her. She won't take just everybody. I mean, she's kind of like got the ruler out, and she doesn't put, if they're not performing, if they're not behaving, if they're, she just doesn't have those kinds of problems in her academy. She won't allow it. But then there are also, so that's just kind of that first filter you got to get through is Dr. Waters. But then we also do use work keys just to make sure that they have the aptitude and the ability to work with their hands.
Okay. And that's good. That's pretty standardized. They use work keys at DPI. We use it with the workforce development boards at community colleges. So that's a pretty standard assessment for workforce in this state. Here's a question. Are only 9th grade students accepted? If we're late to the bandwagon, can we get on in 10th grade, 11th grade?
Well, again, you got to get past Dr. Waters, but she has definitely let people into the program as 12th graders.
Okay.
She encourages and wants them to, be in the 9th grade, but she has opened it up for some 10th, 11th, and 12th if there's particular reasons. They're just moving here, or they just decided they wanted to get into that field, and so we don't have any heartburn about that either. We know there'll be a little bit slower ramp up. For
Some
them.
catch up there,
Yep.
some catch up. But you're willing, you've already demonstrated you're willing to do those types of things. And so other questions for the audience before we wrap up. Other questions. Now, do you require, this was the last question on this sheet, do you require, HAECO, or does Dr. Waters require maintaining a certain standard as it relates to GPA, attendance, things of those nature? She must run a pretty tight ship.
She does, yeah. You have to maintain a C or better average in all of your courses. And they work a lot harder. I mean, it's not easy. They start school, I think this year's school started August 26th, maybe? And I think they started the 6th or the 8th of August.
Wow.
They go another week or two later. They have a longer day. And they do all of that because what happens by the time they're in the 11th grade, when they finish the 11th grade, they have completed all of DPI's requirements. They actually could graduate high school in the 11th grade. But of course, they get all of those DPI requirements out of the way, and then in the 12th grade, they're going to GTCC. They go to school in the morning, to report to high school, then they go to GTCC, and then they come and they intern. And then if they have after-school programs, if they're involved in any after-school activities, they still do that. So they graduate with their graduating class. And now for the STEM school that we've got going at A&T, it's an early college STEM school. Same thing, they have an accelerated high school program, but when they are juniors and seniors, they spend half of the day at the high school. Now the high school is on the A&T campus, but half the day in the high school portion and half of the day in college engineering and pre-engineering classes, that when they graduate high school, they will start as a junior. Which is just phenomenal.
Unbelievable,
I mean,
really.
again, they're at zero educational debt, and they're already a junior. And I'm telling you, every one of these kids will get sucked up with scholarships. It is amazing how bright these students are that are coming out of the early college at A&T.
Kip, you must be on a lot of parents' Christmas lists. Because, you know, getting those young people in as juniors, I mean, you talk about that, the college, those of us who, you know, went to university and graduate school know something about that student loan debt process, and thinking about those jobs where you start off at 25 and work a few years and are up to 50. I mean, you really, a game changer, right? Really is a game changer. And not to poo-poo too much. I know you don't take a lot of flattery, but the reality is incredible, changing the game for people who might not otherwise get that opportunity. And so it ought to be said, I think, frankly, what you have at HAECO, and HAECO's not the only company, you would certainly acknowledge that HAECO's not the only corporation, but as you serve on the NC Works Commission, we tap you quite a bit to help us think through some of these things. But that's a model really that could be applied nationally, really applied nationally to help with some of the, you know, to help train the next generation of the workforce to do good work at a good wage in in-demand professions, and really to radically change qualities of life. So listen, that's our time for today. Kip, I thank you so much. Would you help me to thank Kip Blakely for his time? Thank you so much. We'll take a brief break. I'll be back in here at 3 o'clock talking all things career pathways. Thank you so much.